Let's be innovative. Let's challenge the norm. Let's raise the bar. Let's be the elite.
Lionheart returns debuting its new championship format. For the first time, Lionheart's best will battle in a multi-class format featuring BMW's all-new M-Hybrid V8 and M4 GT3 machines. 55 drivers will face off in the ultimate test in the ultimate driving machine. 18 races at the world's most demanding road courses where traffic takes on a whole new meaning. This year, Lionheart will crown 2 champions, whose name will be etched into the Lionheart history books. Find out next. The Buttkicker Sportscar Championship, presented by BMW Performance Driving School, starts now. Twilight here in Germany, and the Lionheart Racing Series gets ready to race into the waning hours of the championship. There are just a few rounds left as we make our way closer to 2024 to crown drivers as the inaugural Buttkicker Sports Car Series champions. But today here at the Nürburgring, one step closer, those drivers will take. Welcome to the Gomez Sim Industry Nürburgring Grand Prix, presented by Next Level Racing. Delighted to have you along here on RaceSpotTV as we get our way for what is bound to be one of the more interesting rounds of the season as drivers work their way through frenetic traffic periods with only the headlights to guide them. Let's dive straight into our BMW Performance Driving School pre-race show, because my name's Arjuna Kankipati alongside Andrew Kinsella, and boy, are we looking forward to this one.
We absolutely are, Arjuna. This is one that we have had circled on our calendars. Nürburgring, such a classic European track, and then add in the night racing where these drivers will have limited vision. Add in that treacherous turn one that always seems to present itself here at the Nürburgring. This one should be an exciting one.
And so let's take a look then at the Next Level Racing schedule, because as we said, it's a crucial month of October as we work our way into the closing hours of the championship. After this, Imola in the final race of October before things start to stretch on out. Suzuka, Motegi, and of course another night race at Daytona under those night lights to close things out. Interesting little swing of races after this. Imola, Suzuka, Motegi, relatively close and compact, Andrew, and Daytona, of course, a lot more open and a lot more high speed.
Yes, we have two distinctly European flavored tracks with Nürburgring and Imola, both tight, twisty, got some chicanes, got some heavy braking zones, and then the faster, more flowing tracks in Japan with Suzuka and Twin Ring Motegi. But the ultimate speed is definitely, as you say, at Daytona on January 15th. That one is going to be fast, and it's going to be a classic to cap off this season.
And what an inaugural season it has been. Let's talk you through the BMW Performance Driving School LMDH standings, where Phil Krause now takes point after 2 consecutive victories. It's John Baderfer in the HydroRace Geodesic racing machine that slipped to second, but still in front of his teammate Graham Sanders, who's leapfrogged former championship leader Austin Young. Those 3 drivers, though, still 34 points between the 4 of them, and then a further almost 60 points back to Michael O'Brien and company. It's almost now down to just those 4, Andrew, and drop rounds, the one thing that drivers do not want to fall back on, the ability to exclude rounds from the championship. You want to be consistent towards the very end.
You definitely want consistency, but you also want momentum, Arjuna, and no one has momentum right now quite like Phil Krause. He has been reeling off result after result, and it's been showing in his charge up this championship standings into that #1 position. And the HydroRace Geodesic Racing drivers, they're really going to have to regroup and I think work together as well to really make sure that Phil Krause, the momentum stops here today.
And of course, that's the benefit of having the teammates, even though, of course, you can see by the team names, Baderfer and Sanders scored together in the team championship. It's Austin Young all by himself. The GT3 driver standings broken up into Pro and Am, and even though they are separated in the championships, they score points combined out on track themselves, and therefore Sean Campbell, who has had a 100% perfect streak so far, the only race he hasn't won, a race that he missed, has broken away clear of the rest. Ryan Otis only leads Josh Chin by 6 points, and Miguel Vigo will have been thinking, what if the first couple of races of the season had been a little bit more in his direction? He has just leapfrogged Matthew Morhard for 4th, and they're going to be involved in a close battle, you think, behind what is now a breakaway fight for 2nd, but also a breakaway leader in Am, Chase Wilson. Andrew, talking of consistency, maybe not Sean Campbell levels of 100% perfection, but still very much a driver that we continue to see up in the top 5 in the combined GT3 running.
Consistent results, but also consistent speed for Chase Wilson. But Trevor Malone, he's still not out of this yet, Arjuna. We talked about this a number of times. If some disasters happen with the AM Championship in particular, there's often such a point spread between whoever's in first in that class and whoever's in second, because again, they do score the same points as the Pro Championship. It's just that they're generally a little bit lower down the order. So don't count Trevor Malone out quite yet. Chase Wilson's definitely got one hand on the trophy, but I think there still could be a battle if there's a little bit of misfortune that happens over the next couple of rounds for Chase Wilson.
And it might take misfortune to displace our leaders in the HyperX Team Championship as well, because the HydroRace Geodesic Racing team, as well as Synergy Motorsports, have broken away by almost 150 points in the case, 180 points, excuse me, in the case of Synergy Motorsports, now almost 200 points in the case of HydroRace Geodesic. Plenty of close battles behind, but notable shout-outs to the likes of WMP Racing and then HydroRace Geodesic, as well as the private label Team Hype, who of course all are single car outfits in their respective team championships. Here's a look at the Gomez Sim Industry Series details, though, in what is the debut season in the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. We are all driving in fixed setups built by the Majors Garage in 2 ultimate driving machines, the BMW M Hybrid V8, the newest of the sports car prototypes entered into the LMDH world, and of course the BMW M4 GT3. 2 machines that both debuted in the virtual world before they went racing in the real world. And both drivers will go driving away in a BMW M4 GT4 driving experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California. All they've got to do to be able to walk away with that, survive 18 90-minute timed races, but with live race control, crucially meaning you can't get away with too much mischief out on track. The arena track analysis, Andrew, I think this is going to be an interesting one, because realistically, it's the night lights, or lack thereof, that will play the distinguishing factor. But if traffic management, if any of these drivers thought it's going to be bad tonight, it could just be a little bit worse. Why didn't we go racing around the full Nordschleife loop?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting experience for all these drivers, because as you say, most of the time they'll have either some form of ambient lighting or they'll be running in the day, but in this case it's going to be all in the darkness. And as you say, lapping someone in complete darkness, it's another experience altogether. The only thing that some of these drivers will have is just what the taillights of the car in front is going to do, and it's going to make for some definitely hairy moments out there as the prototypes lap those GT3 drivers.
And of course, in the Eiffel Mountains, fortunately no weather to be talking about. Of course, iRacing's working on their weather system. Maybe in 2024 we'll see a little bit more of those, but those type of races. But for the time being, it's 23-24 laps for the GTPs. About 19 to 20 if you're doing some fuel saving in the GT3s. We'll see who's going to be bold with the fuel strategy. Again, 90-minute race, 2 pit stops expected with a limited fuel capacity in both of our machines. With the drivers out on track for qualifying, let's take the time to thank those that make this possible, starting with HyperX. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. You're passionate about sim racing, but it always feels a little flat compared to the feeling of driving a real car. Now you can actually feel what it's like to drive a race car. Butt Kicker haptic hardware and software is easy to install and let you feel every bump in the track, slip of your tire, and engine redline. The tactile feedback is so accurate and realistic, you'll be driving faster and having more fun than ever before. Visit thebuttkicker.com to learn more. If you think sim racing is thrilling, try getting behind the wheel of a real race car. The BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California puts you in the cockpit of one of BMW's fastest cars, complete with roll cage and racing slicks. You'll get fitted with a racing suit, practice pit stops, and lap their track with pro instructors. Nothing virtual about their thrills. To book your M4 GT4 experience, call or visit the links on screen. Next Level Racing is an industry-leading cockpit and motion simulator manufacturer devoted to creating the most immersive experience possible for the global sim racing community. Take your racing to the next level and visit nextlevelracing.com. Gomez Sim Industries are makers of high-end esports equipment and controls, precision-built using nothing but the best materials available today. Passion and handmade craftsmanship drive each made-to-order build, creating a driving experience like no other. Visit gomezsimindustries.com. Arena is an all-new esports streaming experience driven by real-time interactions between gamers and their communities. Arena brings live broadcast fan engagement to the next level. Get involved and make a difference on arena.tv. And last but not least, graphics. From simple logos to full branding for your companies, virtual designs to liveries raced by Indy 500 champions. Graphics offers the finest quality with a wide range of design services. Visit graphicsesports.com to learn more. The sun has very much set and the drivers are now very much truly only guided by their headlights. It's a qualifying session fraught with danger, and that's why most of them have already elected to get their times onto the board. There's no surprise, I think, to many who will be on top. It's Phil Krause as well as Sean Campbell on their respective pole positions. The margins, well, a tenth and a half at the front of the LMDH, where Phil Krause and Graham Sanders currently share the front row. And it's a surprise entrant onto the outside of the front row in the GT3s, because take a look at that, Andrew. It's Matthew Morhart that's currently alongside Sean Campbell.
It was a storming lap from Matthew Morhart there. He beat his teammate out by almost 0.3 of a second there, and he's only 0.3 back of Sean Campbell, so this is definitely a surprise. Matthew Morhart, we've talked about his progress all season long, Arjuna, and this is a step forward again for Matthew Morhart. And it's really good to see that he has gotten stronger and stronger as this season has progressed.
It's going to be interesting where now Joshua Chin, who's on his final attempt in this qualifying session, can put himself. He is about 1 and a bit tenths off the back of Otis, even further off of Morhart, and he dives to pit lane, so not even going to use that final lap. Maybe ran himself wide of track limits and practices what is going to be an important pit entry. Fourth the best that we'll see. The number 73 run as at least a qualifying start ends as he rolls his way down the pit lane, and we hear the klaxons going off as well. Who else is still out on track, you wonder, and has times to set? Well, lh.RaceSpotTV, you can follow along with live timing and scoring throughout the rest of the Lionheart campaign. Here's New York's own Andrew Marquez towards the final corner.
And Marquez trying to get just a little bit more on this final attempt here. coming across the start-finish line, it doesn't look like... Oh, he does improve just a little bit, but it's not going to be enough to raise him up any... sorry, he does go up into 5th place just by... Oh, by 1,000th of a second there, Arjuna.
That's not by much, is it? And as Chase Wilson then jumps his way up into 7th, just behind on track, that's going to be, once again, the best of the AM drivers for the AM Championship leader. That's qualifying done and dusted, though, because Sean Campbell was the only driver that we thought might still have a lap time to improve on, and he is also now watching on from the pit lane. Just a couple of drivers getting final moments of practice around this track. Take a look at those weather conditions. 10 p.m. It's iRacing day, almost the middle of the summer, Andrew, and it means the sun still lingers in the background, but once we go racing, don't expect it to play a part, and those track temperatures, well, they won't move from the 21 degrees Celsius that they stand at right now.
The darkness is quickly descending, and it is enshrouding these drivers, and it is going to be a dark and twisty race for all of these drivers. The other thing is it's a pretty calm night, only 11 km/h winds, so there shouldn't be too much difficulty there, but it's going to be a fast and furious night here in Germany.
There's a look at the Michael Schumacher S, of course, rising up out of that hairpin at the bottom of the track. That's one of the crucial zones to try and run your way on through. Some iRacing hoardings, and crucially, what you'll see, the cones blocking off the faster of the chicanes. Andrew, we run the slower Grand Prix layout chicane, which does mean traffic interactions will be quite interesting at the very end of the lap.
Traffic interactions will be interesting, and it does present maybe another outbraking opportunity and a passing opportunity at the end of the straight. Potentially, obviously, the other main opportunity for these drivers will be down into turn 1. So hopefully 2 passing zones for these drivers to make their moves happen. But yeah, traffic is going to be very, very interesting to watch today. It's going to be, I think, very hectic out there.
You can see just how much Matt Taylor, who is just, again, running some practice laps right now, clatters over the curbs and runs his way around the final corner. Nice little BMW logos off through the final corner. There's all sorts of manufacturer symbols all around the track, though. With 30 seconds left to go, Michael O'Brien's jumped into the YouTube chat, and 1.4 seconds off in qualifying, maybe not where we expect the Kiwi to traditionally be. That's why the message maybe is not a surprise in the chat. How do drive, Andrew?
How do drive indeed, and hopefully the answer to that will be fast, but we're going to have to see here in about 10 seconds time.
Yeah, qualifying will come to a close as soon as that clock strikes 0, and the cars will get gridded up to go for what I believe will be a short formation lap. Not much temperature in the tires to start with, not much time to build them up either, as now they work their way towards the green flag of what is going to be a surely hectic round here at the Nürburgring. We made our way over to the green hell. We're ready to go racing once more. So let's run you down through today's butt kicker starting grid. And so it's Phil Krause and Graham Sanders split by over 1/10.5 of a second. That will bring us to the green as Krause tries to make it 3 wins on the bounce and to bring his championship momentum all the way towards the end of October. John Baderfer and Austin Young complete the triumvirate of the Hydra Race geodesic machines at the front, while David Sirois and then Bradley Sexton will make up the 3rd row of the grid as the Synergy Motorsports a grey machine looks very pink on our screens. Michael O'Brien, Caleb Bensi, Alex Guyon, Matt Taylor, and then Alexander Van der Stant round out the 11 BMW M Hybrid V8s that will get ready to roll and try to work their way through what will surely be a quite scared GT3 field. Sean Campbell once again on pole position as is expected, but it's Matthew Morhart, the surprise alongside as he continues to build up his confidence and build up his speed. Ryan Otis, Josh Chin are fighting for 2nd in the championship. They share row 2 on the grid. It's Andrew Marquez and Brian Bennett in the graphics, LC Corbo and Synergy Motorsports Blue, number 63 and 161 that will line up behind them. 7th goes to Chase Wilson, the first of the AMs, and then Tyler Graf is sandwiched between Wilson and the rest of the AM contingent. Malone, Staples, Reagan and Carter share the rest of your top 12, with Logan Spath, the sole driver, not really getting a representative time on the board, and Lionel Kalisto, the very final driver, to roll in a 25-car field. They're already rolling for what is a shortened formation lap. We'll talk you through the featured onboard cameras then once we get underway. Andrew, what are your expectations for what lie ahead?
I think the first thing that you have to look at is lap 1, turn 1. This is always a tricky turn 1 where it invites, sends up the inside, trying to get every position that you can on this start. And I think that it's going to produce a little chaos here today. And then I think it's all about survival for the rest of the night, just trying to negotiate that traffic. It's going to be hectic, and it's going to be dark, and it's going to be scary. There are going to be some scary moments out there.
We'll race to the championship under the night lights at Daytona, but here at the Nürburgring, we're ready to go for the latest round in the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. It's going to be a long hold as they work their way into the starting zone. Competition, commitment, excitement. This is Lionheart. We're underway for the Gomez Sim Industries Nürburgring Grand Prix presented by Next Level Racing. Storming start from Phil Kraus as we plunge down the hill. The Hydra Race Geodesic trio try and sort it out amongst themselves. No changes amongst the three of them. And as they work their way through the pitch black of the night, safely through the arena for the first time of asking, they will go, with the exception of Austin Young that spun himself around. Big drama then for one of our championship contenders. GT3's almost 3 wide, Andrew, down through turn number 1.
There was a couple of rows 3 wide through turn 1 in the GT3 field, but it looks like they've all sort of basically gotten sorted out. Matthew Morhart has defended well from Josh Chin. Ryan Otis was the big loser on that start down to 4th position, but it's Sean Campbell who is leading the way once again in the GT3s.
And Austin Young is back on pit lane, so that's big drama. And now Bradley Sexton has also run off the track as well as the GTPs are down at the bottom of the hairpin. GT3s working their way towards the very same complex midway through the midway sector of the lap. It's almost 7/10 the margin that Sean Campbell has been able to build up, but still draft plays its part. Matthew Morhart holds strong with Josh Chin still filling up those rear view mirrors. Top of your screen though, Andrew, look at the margin the top 3 have as they work their way towards the chicane for the first time.
Yeah, it's definitely built up a lot of space there for your top 3. It looks like 4th, 5th, and 6th is definitely still under consideration there. Van de Sande has had a really good start, as well as Bensi and O'Brien. Unfortunate beginning of the race there for Bradley Sexton, who had a storming qualifying effort in this partial season for him.
And now more drama down the back as Taylor and Sexton. More issues for the both of them, and you can't tell in the night light, but Matt Taylor's lost the rear clip of that BMW M Hybrid and will surely have to take a slow crawl back towards the pit lane. Before we can take a look at what happened at that, we have got to try and figure out what happened through the arena section. First time of asking for Austin Young, who's already got around as we spool to the replay, and David Sirois on the case.
It almost looked like there might have been a little bit of net code between I believe that was Sirois and Austin Young, and then afterwards he just went straight off at a certain point. So here's here's Sexton going off as well, but the big damage for Austin Young was actually just after that. Now this is finally Matt Taylor looping it on his own, and then unfortunately nowhere to go for Bradley Sexton, right into the back of Matt Taylor there.
And so you saw the damage, unfortunate there. We'll see how it plays out for the rest of them. So the LMDHs have started to filter their way on separated. Still 2 seconds splits the top 3, the championship protagonists, but barring now Austin Young watching on with Matt Taylor from the pit lane. Matthew Morhart has not been dropped, you know, and he's holding Josh Chin further than Sean Campbell's holding off the number 62. Ryan Otis has, of course, lost out on this start, but having said that, losing out is a relative thing. Fuel saving might be important here, Andrew, because cold temperatures means plenty of grip, less chances for fuel saving.
Yes, and we know that if anyone can fuel save, it is Ryan Otis. He knows exactly what he's doing in terms of the fuel save. Has gotten the better of Josh Chin a number of times with that fuel saving technique so far this year. So definitely, I think Otis doesn't love where he is right now, but he certainly doesn't hate it either.
I think I said less grip. I meant more grip, which means, of course, more time full throttle, less fuel being saved. Arjuna logic. It sometimes works, most of the time it doesn't. That's why we also say never trust a commentator's math, as they're all squabbling over 8th position in this combined GT3 field behind as Reagan and Carter almost trip over each other out of that chicane. It's allowed Marquez and Staples to somewhat break away. Chase Wilson, best of the AMs, of course, holding pretty strong up in 7th in the combined running order. It's what he wants to see. Staples is only 2 seconds behind, but Reagan, Malone, some of his other championship rivals, Andrew, finding themselves in battles.
Yeah, a lot of battling here at the beginning of the race in the GT3 field, particularly what we're watching in sort of the back half of this field. A lot of jockeying for position. I think a couple of drivers may be out of position from what they were hoping for. Maybe a few mistakes in qualifying. Lionel Kalisto starting to make his way up through the field as well. So definitely Chase Wilson, your AM championship leader, is under a fair bit of pressure here from from Creighton Carter, Trevor Malone, as well as Chris Staples. So there's definitely a lot to race for in this AM championship in this back half of the field.
It's a relatively lengthy lap here at the Grand Prix layout, about 5 odd kilometers, just over 3 plus miles as well, which means that lap time's 1:42 for the LMDH is just under 2 minutes, 1:57s for GT3s. It is going to take a decent amount of time for traffic to be a thing. The GT3s halfway through the lap, the LMDH is just opening up the lap of their own, and you can see Phil Krause is starting to break away. Graham Sanders closer to his teammate John Baderford than maybe he'd like. At some point, if these two continue to drop back, you talked about the team game slightly earlier, Andrew. Potentially Baderford might be slightly faster, might be able to close up to the 91.
Yeah, but the question is, how much does Sanders want to play that team game right now, or does Sanders think that, hey, I've got a pretty similar car to Baderford, since we're in the same setup, I can go just as fast as he can. So very, very interesting to watch what happens in these fixed setup leagues when teammates come together, because generally speaking, one of the people that you want to beat the most is your teammate.
I mean, that's always your first comparison, isn't it? Especially when you're on an equal playing field. Fixed setups means everyone are on the equal playing field, if you will. Michael O'Brien said wasn't feeling so confident. How do drive? Not like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, back end just steps out on him. Nothing he could do. Just carried a little bit too much speed into that corner, and around she went.
Just tried and tried. Unfortunate. Tires maybe not going to be too happy with that one either. O'Brien is now down in 7th, but with Sexton, Young, and Taylor all having retired in the LMDH class, and now Logan Spath having joined them as well. 25 started, already 4 retired. The night has taken plenty of victims as 4 laps comes to a close.
Yeah, Sexton might be trying to get back into the race, but certainly Spath, Taylor, and Young are all out. As I said, Austin Young had a massive impact after that small spin that we saw, so his car was terminal right from the very beginning of this race. So definitely not the way that one of our championship contenders wanted to have this race go.
Chase Wilson, talk about championship contenders, makes the move on the Pro Machine of Tyler Graf down the bottom of the track, now climbing up in towards that Michael Schumacher-S. And Wilson, as we said, continues to be impressive, continues to knock on the doors of various top 5 finishing positions, and right now only 3 seconds off the back of Brian Bennett. Not be surprised if Wilson's eyeing up another impressive points haul. It's always important, though, to note where the other AM drivers are, because they're battling pros for points, and that's where Chris Staples right now finds himself in some trouble. Andrew Marquez going to look the long way around as they work their way to the chicane. Pro versus AM on the brakes.
Yeah, but the AM looks to go just that little bit deeper. Marquez, of course, more of a smooth driver, not necessarily the last of the late breakers, but it definitely looked like Chris Staples is on maximum defense right now. And that's one of the benefits of Chase Wilson getting around Tyler Graf, is that's now put a little bit of separation between himself and Staples.
Austin Young giving us an update in chat that had a bit of a technical issue. And unfortunately, as soon as he was back in with those issues somewhat mitigated, it put him in a situation where contact was made, car was bent, and rear wing was already gone. Very difficult in that situation to keep going regardless of the damage, and that car was terminal, like Andrew mentioned, as soon as the contact occurred. So Marquez finds himself ensconced in the AM battle ostensibly, but of course it's all for points together, so they will try and now figure out amongst themselves. But if you cycle up towards Matthew Morehart, that number 62 Synergy Motorsports car, out of drafting range now, Andrew. Sean Campbell's done it once more.
Yes, and this time it's only taken him 10 minutes into the race, or just even a little bit less, in fact, to break the draft to that second place position. But you got to be impressed with what Matthew Morehart is doing, despite losing the draft to Sean Campbell. He's not just keeping Josh Chin at bay, he's actually starting to gap Josh Chin just a little bit. and Chin is going to have one eye on the back of him, because Ryan Otis is still all over the back of that number 73 car.
And before someone says, oh, it's a Synergy Motorsport sandwich, no, it's not. No, it's not. Do you name your sandwiches after the bread? It's a private label Team Hype sandwich with some wonderful Synergy Motorsports bread. Just covering my bases, Andrew, and said, in case Lewis McLeod is somewhere listening in the middle of the night in England.
I mean, why wouldn't he be when we've got racing like this, Arjuna?
He's very particular about his sandwich terminology. He's definitely not called out me on many an occasion for making that mistake. Here's, once again, though, 8th in the GT3s as we take a look back towards them. It's still Staples, Marquez, Reagan, and Malone. But realistically, I feel if you're Andrew Marquez, you might feel a little bit antsy seeing the fact that Staples is losing some ground to Tyler Graf in front. 158.5 for Graf, not a representative time that we can see for Staples just yet. Crosses the line half a second slower. That's the margin that Marquez will be looking at.
Absolutely, and you can definitely tell that some of these GT3s are starting to get antsy behind Chris Staples, but they've got something else to deal with, Arjuna. We've got our GTP leaders coming through.
It's first cycle through of traffic, and usually you'd expect this to be the most chaotic, but somehow I get the sense it might actually be the most tame, because they're all going to be a little bit more careful with the night running. It's allowed Kraus to be closed on, though, by the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing pair. Sanders and Baderfer have brought the gaps back down to within 7/10 of one another at the very front. Caleb Bensi, David Sirra, and Alexander Van der Sant, though, with only 10 minutes complete, Andrew, already 8 seconds behind these drivers.
Yeah, definitely not the way that they were hoping to start this race, but I will say one driver who did lose out in that exchange is Andrew Marquez that we were following. Chris Reagan has gotten around him in that exchange. He was a little bit too polite letting some of the GTPs by.
It's always one of those risk versus reward situations, and those behind can try and take advantage, and successfully done there. Marquez drops crucial position. You can hear the lift off there of the throttle as Kraus is being very, very patient with the traffic. It's allowed momentum to build on the side of the 100, but in towards now that slower chicane. This is where we'll, for the first time, see just how potentially different their runs into the corner are. Fortunately for Kraus and company, not going to get into the GT3s in that chicane. Instead, it's going to be out of the final corner where it's 3 split by 1.2 seconds. Kraus, Sanders, and Baderfer fighting for the championship in the closing stages. It's only fitting, Andrew, they're towards the front once again.
Absolutely. 1, 2, 3 in the championship and 1, 2, 3 in the race, and this is just how we like it when our championships get decided on the track itself. Look at the difference in braking, Arjuna, into turn 1 as we ride on board with John Baderfer. I think that was 2 or 3 GT3s that Sanders got around there under braking.
Oh, big wiggle there from Sanders as he tries to look past. I think that's Sean Campbell, the final of the GT3 runners, and indeed it is. All 3 of the leaders have gotten on through, and safely as well. We'll see how they cycle from here. Back to Caleb Bensi, David Sirra, and Alexander Van der Sant. Very much fighting now for 4th position, hoping to pick up the pieces if anyone at the front drops off a podium spot. And you can see David Sirra trying to be a little bit careful getting past Chase Wilson. Van der Sant getting slow off the corner, closing on Tyler Graf as well. No one really gaining in that sequence.
No, not too many gainers in that, but definitely I want to give a big shout out to David Sirra, in fact, because we've seen him not necessarily adapt as quickly as we were expecting to these prototypes, but this is a really solid race for that number 99 car. Definitely showing a little bit more speed than he has in the past here, so far so good for David Sirwa on the number 99.
You can see that the drivers for the time being seem to be relatively safe. Josh Chin, as mentioned, losing ground to Matthew Morhart, but traffic going to get past his inside and potentially Constantina. Ryan Otis towards the purple number 73. Only 21 machines still out on track. Bradley Sexton still sits in pit lane, 10 minutes and counting, working on the BMW M Hybrid V8, but seemingly 3 of those prototypes retiring has meant that the traffic relatively tame, all things considered. You can see them juking in and out, though, as the hybrids try and get a touch of draft. That's Alexander Van der Sant, who doesn't quite get past the entire train that we're watching. Checked up behind Matthew Morhart and then has to lunge to the inside to get on through.
And that's the danger of this type of racing, is if you can't quite get past the whole train, then suddenly you lose 2 or 3 tenths or more in trying to. But this is a nice little battle here for second in GT3 Arjuna, with Otis and particularly Chin chasing after Matthew Morehart right now. Looks like Matthew wasn't quite as comfortable through the traffic as Chin and Otis was, and it's allowed them to sort of gain back up just a little bit.
See if this is now just, though, with almost 15 minutes done, about half a fuel stint, give or take, given that we expect 2 pit stops. If Chin or Otis are really going to force the issue, we do tend to see drivers be able to go longer than 30 minutes with the fuel in the tank. The question becomes, how do they play out one shorter pit stop, one slightly longer pit stop? You see Josh Chin try and make some interesting strategy decisions. They have not always worked out in his favor. It took a while for us to get one cycle through of traffic. Given the relatively small grid, it's going to take quite a while for us to get a second cycle through, you'd imagine, as well. Maybe just beginning our way in towards the pit stop window. It means for these drivers as well, back with Malone, Reagan and Staples, 3 AMs now, all in front of the pro Andrew Marquez. They're going to be fighting wheel to wheel into their first pit stop cycle.
And they have been fighting wheel to wheel. There was a little bit of contact between Reagan and Staples earlier on in this lap, and Staples is not giving up here. He's looking to the inside potentially, but I think Staples is just so confident on the brakes, it's going to be very, very difficult to pass. But you can tell that it's not just Reagan who's looking to try and get by. It's Malone, it's Marquez, and Malone chucks it up the inside of Reagan here.
Oh, is it going to get a good run out of the corner? Usually the outside's where you can run a bit more speed down, and is Malone going to be vulnerable to Andrew Marquez as that gap back to 11 starts to close? No. And it's a 6-car train that runs their way down the hill, all the way on the left-hand side of the track, as you would expect, but very much still running in line for the time being. We've seen a swap around, by the way. David Sirwa got past Caleb Bensi, and downhill turn 1, a difficult place to get things done under the brakes. Well, it helps when someone has a bit of a moment in front of you.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of rear locking there for Caleb Bensi. We'll have to see how long this stays with Bensi behind Sirwa, because Bensi's been looking really racy here today so far. But yeah, just a small mistake, and that's all it takes in some cases, particularly in the heavy braking zones.
I really enjoy the fact as well that we've seen such an evolution in how the drivers have been able to be comfortable on the brakes through the almost now year that this car has been around on the iRacing platform. Going to be even more interesting, of course, as more GTPs come to the platform, how the drivers continue to choose to develop their preferences. Eyes on the timing don't deceive you. Ryan Otis now is in front of Josh Chin, so it's Synergy Motorsports 2 and 3, private label Team Hype, and now down in 4th spot. I don't necessarily think this is going to make Josh Chin panic too much just yet, though, because again, these conditions that they're facing right now will be amongst the coldest that they'll ever see. 22 degrees Celsius, Andrew. Every little bit of fuel that you can save will help, and that's why being 2 cars back in line is better than being 1 car back in line.
Yes, it is. And the only counter I have to that is that Josh Chin doesn't seem to like going as long as Ryan Otis does on any of these stints, so it may be a moot point for him.
Maybe he's starting to listen to the concern in the commentary box, but you never know. We'll see. We'll see in about 11 minutes' time, I guess, is the only way that we'll really know. For the top 3, by the way, who have an incredible margin. Now 15 seconds plus back to David Sirwa and company. Graham Sanders holding steady. John Bader for losing touch, and you can't say traffic's playing its part here. These are just 3 drivers being allowed to lap as quickly as they want, and Baderfer was only a tenth slower than Kraus last time by. He was almost 3 tenths slower than his teammate.
Yeah, Kraus is definitely, the gap to Sanders has stabilized, but I really do think that you're right. It's Sanders who's picked up the pace. It's Baderfer and Kraus have sort of stabilized here, but
oh,
well, that was interesting.
Slow down.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, but Bensi's dropped a ways away off of David Sirwa as well, so it may have been a slowdown for Bensi through the final chicane.
Let's see if we can grab a replay, but I mean, slowdowns through that chicane very possible because you really try and cut as much as you can. You can see the brake rotors lighting up as we cycle to the replay. Here's a look. It's hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure it's through one of those complexes where he just takes a little bit too much liberty with the curves.
Yeah, definitely looks like there may have been a little bit of a cut there on that second curve, I think.
It's so marginal to call and so difficult to call as well, but unfortunately, that's an automated system. It's black and white. You can do little about it. Back towards this GT3 conga line for 8th as now Callisto's closed up on Marquez. Sanders now back in front of Betafer as the HydraRace Geodesic pair swap back around. I'm very confused at what's going on here now, Andrew.
No, sorry, that it wasn't Sanders. It was Bensi who had dropped behind Van de Sant there.
But didn't Sanders also get a slowdown? It looked like it, at least to me. Here's Malone trying to now work on Staples. Crucial points for AM drivers. Inside line, plunging down through what is a compression through the Turn 1 apex. Holds strong, at least for the time being. It's Staples still leading the line.
Yeah, this has been, you called it a conga line, but it's been one of the most disorganized conga lines that I've ever seen. Malone has been all over the back of Staples, and then every time that Malone gets a run and gets a little bit blocked up, Chris Reagan comes right back at him. So it's been a ding-dong battle here between these drivers in the back half of the GT3 field.
In the middle half of this lap, there aren't really passing opportunities, only places where you can hold each other back. In the similar liveries for Staples and Malone don't indicate any alliance, instead the lack thereof. They are independent drivers working by themselves and by definition for themselves as well. Climbing up in towards that Michael Schumacher-esque. Already 10 seconds behind Tyler Graf now. Remember, almost 15 minutes ago I mentioned Andrew Marquez would have been looking at that gap and getting a little bit worried. It's just continued to rise its way on up. It's in towards this back straightaway as a little bit wide from Staples. Malone closes the 69, hoping to get a good run into one of the best passing opportunities.
Staples has been so defensive that he's costing this entire train time, hand over fist. Look at Malone coming down the outside into this chicane here, seeing if this will work maybe. And look at how far Chris Reagan goes under the brakes there. He's closed right up again. Just back and forth between all three of these drivers.
While it's close here, stark contrast towards second, third, and fourth, who once upon a time were split by, just under a second now, split by just over 4 seconds, as Ryan Otis almost out of drafting range of his teammate Matthew Morhart. Joshua Jin very much out of drafting range of the both of them. I wonder if these are all slowdowns happening because, again, as
Turn 1, Arjuna, turn 1, Malone.
So it's Trevor Malone and Chris Reagan as the battle comes to blows, and they drop to 12th and 13th in the class.
It was a misjudgment under braking for Chris Reagan, hit the back of Trevor Malone, and then all of that battling that they've done is all for naught here.
In through the arena section, they'll all pick it back up. Yeah, as we were watching, it's allowed Marquez and Callisto, the two pro machines, to cycle back in front of them. Let's go take a look at the replay, and Andrew, talk us through it.
So Phil Krause is just coming up to put the GT3's a second lap down. Malone gets on the brakes just a little bit early to try and tuck in behind Krause through the corner, and Reagan's not expecting it. Just hits Malone up the back, and there definitely looks to be significant damage on that number 69 car.
We'll see if it means Malone has to bring it down towards pit lane, but after we're talking about how he's going to just take some bad luck for Chase Wilson's championship hopes to maybe be a little less shiny, and for Malone to close, it's the misfortune that's gone the other direction. Could be, again, a 5th retirement of the race. We're moving down to just 20 cars out there and running. Everyone has broken and split themselves up. The GTPs, the LMDHs, even the two HydraRace Geodesic Racing teammates, now 2 seconds between the two of them. As I was just talking about before they all crashed in towards turn number 1, Andrew, the lack of lights might make things a little bit more difficult for those trying to pick their way through track limits.
It certainly does. You have far less less visual cues to judge your judge your track limits and judge what the track surface is doing. So it definitely makes things much more difficult from that perspective, for sure.
I've always found that if you also make the cardinal sin of sim racing driving and reference your brake markers and turn in spots from shadows, then well, as soon as you find the sun moves around, or the night in this case beckons, then you find yourself in some trouble, because shadows, well, as the lighting changes, tend to move as well. It was almost a miscommunication as lap traffic saunters its way on past. That might have been Michael O'Brien, not entirely sure. Graham Sanders has lost a whole bunch of time, and now 5 seconds clear. Phil Krause very much looking like it could be 3 wins in a row.
Yeah, there was definitely some misfortune when it came to some GT3 traffic for Graham Sanders and John Batafor there, and it's put them, as you say, well behind Phil Krause here. So the traffic gives, but the traffic has not yet taken from Phil Krause, so we'll have to see if he encounters something, but he is definitely doing everything that he needs to do to be able to take home this race, certainly in the early going here.
And with the front of the GT3 so splintered up, it's very much just about where you catch them as to how much time you lose, rather than what they do when you catch them. And so out of the final corner, Sanders, Batafor pretty much equal in towards turn 1. 0.8 of a second will split the two of them. Still got a couple more machines to deal with though, of course, the Synergy Motorsports pair, and then Sean Campbell, 100% streak continued in qualifying, continues at the front of the field as well. And you've got to wonder what it's going to take to beat him, because every time that we see him go racing, no matter what car that it's in, he's up towards the front here on RaceSpotTV.
And I think Campbell at this point, he's just sort of vibing out in the front of the field at this point. Only 4 seconds back to Matthew Morhart, so the gap sort of stabilized just a little bit after Campbell put on nearly 3 seconds in the first 15 minutes of this race. So far, it's been just a nice quiet race, and I think he's just sort of managing the gap at this point.
I'm going to look if Sean Campbell has already won a race today, which he's done on a number of occasions, and indeed, yes, he did. He's already won in an LMP3 car in the Precision Racing League, so hoping to make it another double victory. And you know, LMP3, GT3, there's a 3 in there for the two of them. They must be very similar machines. They're not. It's one's a prototype, one's a GT machine. It's very, very different. We'll ask him what it's like switching back and forth between the two of them in probably 63 plus minutes time. But with a fuel window that's about 23 laps for GTPs, 19 laps for the GT3s, Andrew closing in on the hour. We're still a good 5-10 minutes away from the completion of the first pit cycle.
Yeah, it's a fairly wide pit window, especially for the prototypes here today. Which does open up some strategy possibilities, particularly maybe if you're Batafor or Sanders, you might look at where you're going to come out on track and see if you can get a little bit of extra clean air time.
I always wonder at a track like this where the pit lane also spits you out directly in towards turn number 1, cold conditions, how scared are you going to be about potential for cold tires down into that opening corner? Caleb Benzie, though, going to be the first to come down to pit lane. Not sure if there's been more drama for that Team Race First machine, but you see Bradley Sexton sitting there, Trevor Malone sitting there, both just getting damaged, repaired on their car, maybe more in hope than anything else. Expected pit stop times, Andrew. I was going to say about 20 seconds, but Benzie gets out of the car.
Yeah, and Benzie had been really struggling since he made that mistake and allowed David Sirwa by. So I wonder if there might have been a little bit of damage, maybe an incident that we didn't see. But he had certainly fallen well down the order even before he came down pit road there.
We might be down to just 7 running LMDHs then, as Andrew Marquez, only 1.2 off the back of Chris Staples, still has Kalisto, fellow pro machine, behind for 9th and 10th positions. Final spots inside of the top 10, and Andrew Marquez is today's BMW Performance Driving School driver profile and has not actually competed in the Retro Series. Those are his open wheel stats. And Andrew, we know that Andrew Marquez, jumping from car to car, becoming ingratiated in the Lionheart community. Look at that, 21 top 10s in the 39 starts. He's always in and amongst the top runners. 3 top 5s, still looking to crack the consistency to be up towards the front, race after race.
I think for Marquez, he has that consistency factor, but unfortunately, he just doesn't quite have the ultimate speed just yet. But he is definitely one of those drivers who's up and coming and quickly learning and getting faster and faster as these seasons goes on. He had a really good, solid qualifying effort here today. Unfortunately, he's fallen down the order just a little bit, but one of the hallmarks of Andrew Marquez is he's one of those drivers who always seems to be running at the end of these races. He does such a good job navigating his way through incidents and taking care of the car and making sure that he's there at the end of the race. But it does look like we do have, I believe that was Chris Staples coming down pit lane. So this should actually release Andrew Marquez just a little bit if he does have a little bit extra, and he was sort of saving fuel behind them now.
And so now it's pressure on. Interesting though that Staples comes in a bit early, maybe trying something different on the strategy, trying to just make it a little bit more even and clear cut. Also benefits from the fact that there's no traffic to contend with right now, and he should deposit himself back into plenty of clean air. Leaves Callisto Marquez still embroiled in a fight with one another. Back with Reagan and Carter, who after the tumultuous turn number 1 experience, Reagan Carter, Chris Reagan fighting now for 10th position. Given how much drama we've seen so far, Andrew, for these drivers, there are solid points on the line just by continuing to stay out of trouble.
Absolutely. This is one of those races that you need to find a way to be there at the end. You need to be able to take advantage of the carnage and get the points wherever you can. So for Chris Reagan, it's all about recovery at this point, trying to recover from that mistake. And for Creighton Carter, it's doing whatever he can to keep that driver who wasn't at one point behind him, or at one point ahead of him, now he must keep him behind him.
There's the look from the Elite West Racing car. You can just see very little visibility with the lights. Barely pick apart the various details on the car in front, riding from this roof camera, and in fact can barely pick out the number on the car that we're seeing the perspective from, such as the lack of visibility that we have at the time being. These drivers will have some traffic closing in the next handful of laps, and they'll be hoping that 19 laps into the run, closing on the 23-24 that we were told the fuel window should be, that these drivers can make trips to pit lane before trips through traffic once more. Sanders and Badefer locked in a fight for second, and you correctly said at the start, these are teammates, but might not be driving as teammates just yet. Andrew, are they going to be fighting this early in the race if they've still only got 4.5 seconds to close on Phil Kraus?
I think that probably the more likely scenario at this point, Arjuna, is that one of them is going to go off strategy just a little bit and see if they can't create a little bit of separation, and then one of the strategies might work better than the other one. So I think that's more likely. I don't expect them to really be fighting tooth and nail before the pit stop, though.
Oh, that's deep under the brakes from Badefer. Really closes up on the back of his teammate. Closed the margin in the last handful of laps by about half a second or so, but 2/10 built up once again by Kraus last time at the line. See just how much they are trying to cut the limits of the track everywhere they go. This is the one part of the track running wide out of the arena where track limits aren't a consideration. Everywhere else, you've got to be a little bit careful. Badefer down one gear, down another gear through the second part of the corner. Got to be so patient at a track like this, Andrew, because yes, it's a modern Formula One style Grand Prix facility, but it's still old school in its nature in many ways.
It is, and the interesting thing riding on board with John Badefer there is that you can also see that the two teammates are taking slightly different lines through these corners. Badefer's maybe taking a little bit of a later apex, and Sanders is going into these corners a little bit deeper. And that's one of the cool things about some of these more old school racetracks is there's often more than one fast way to get around these tracks. So it's just definitely very interesting to see the differences in driving styles, even between teammates who, while they might not be setting up the car for this series, they'll have plenty of experience driving each other's setups and driving in similar styles, but they still do have those differences.
Chris Reagan's peeled off to pit lane, saw the traffic coming and said, nope, get me out of it. Kraus, Sanders, and Badefer have all stayed on the track as well, but Kraus lost out some time in that final sector, and the teammates now get back down to just under 3.5 seconds. We always say it, the traffic will give and the traffic will take. Kraus closes up on a couple more machines. Now this is Callisto and Marquez at the very end of the arena section. The 97 of Callisto will be first up, and Kraus is going to have to set up a move around the outside on exit. Again, taking liberties with the track that you can fortunately do there. Tries to minimize the time that he loses. Gap, though, shrinks to under now 3 seconds.
Yeah, but of course now Sanders and Betafer will have to negotiate Marquez and Callisto here in very short order. Looks like they might have just caught them at a little bit of a better spot, but still very important that both of them get through. Looks like one will. Marquez does let Betafer through as well.
I think Marquez recognized that there were 2 GTPs. The LMDH is coming down my inside. I better make sure I give just enough room. Look at the speed. Oh, that camera angle on board with Betafer just shows you the momentum up through that Michael Schumacher S. Fixed setups, of course, as well. I wonder for these drivers, Andrew, the Krauses, the Sanders, the Betafers, who have experience, like you say, setting this car up, know what they want from it. In these fixed setups built by the Majors garage, they have to adapt their driving styles to what the setup demands from them.
Yeah, and it can be a difficult thing for these drivers, particularly if a setup goes really against what you normally do in a car. You really almost have to relearn how to drive, change up where you're looking to apex the car, change up how you're braking. There's so much that goes into setup building that isn't just considering what's the fastest way you can make the car, but it's also what's the fastest way you can make the car go for you. So when you have that fixed setup, you have to figure out what's the fastest way you can make that car go instead.
Pit stops underway for GT3s as Wilson and Graf find themselves in the box, and now 25 seconds later, Wilson came in as the AM leader, leaves as the AM leader as well. Net on the pit stops. David Sirwa, first of the LMDHs to have made his way down the lane, slides his way in towards the lane as well, and will be stationary, you'd assume, for probably another 20, 30 seconds as well. Clear of most of the traffic are the top 3 runners in the LMDHs. They're on to their 22nd lap. Maximum fuel window, we were told, was 24. Andrew, who do you think comes in first?
My prediction would probably be Betafer. I think that he'll want to try and get a lap in clean air from his teammate, but you never know. I do think he'll be one of these 2 Hydro Race Geodesic Racing drivers, though.
I feel like Phil Kraus has been able to run a tempo so far in this race, has pulled away and controlled the traffic. Lights flash from the 67, just an indication that, hey, I'm coming, I'm following through as well, and clear into the chicane. Important moment there. Kraus, though, maybe he's been pushing on the fuel number. He exits stage right, so does Graham Sanders. And almost as though, Andrew, they were just trying to prove you wrong, John Betafer's the only one that goes 1 lap longer.
Well, I did say that Betafer would try to do something different from Sanders,
Fair.
so it makes sense that it was either going to be one or the other.
And so now important for him with a light car as well, Andrew, with tires that probably haven't worn that much in cool conditions to make this extra lap count.
Absolutely. And Betafer's last lap was within 0.2 of his fastest lap, so he is definitely still well within the prime of those tires, so it's all down to execution here for Betafer, maximizing this lap and seeing if he can potentially leapfrog his teammate.
I think Alexander Van der Sant is entering the pit lane as well. Plenty of GT3s, including Josh Chin, who's leapfrogged Ryan Otis through the cycle. We'll talk about them in a few moments' time. But Kraus, 28.6. That's the pit stop for the private label team hype car. And a longer one for Graham Sanders. Now, as we watch the private label team hype machine descend out of pit lane, I'm just a little bit worried. 37.2. There's no penalty. Just a lengthy stop for fuel there for the number 100.
Yeah, very interesting there from Sanders. Looks like he is filling that car right up to the brim and maybe just had a little bit of damage that needed repairs as well. But that's definitely a long stop, so that's going to help Betafer here. If Betafer can have even a 34-second stop, conceivably he should be out in front of his teammate here.
The LED panel says number 2, but that was just by virtue of how they crossed the timing beams at the start of the previous lap. John Badefer expected to exit out of the chicane and enter in towards pit lane, and indeed, great shot working his way through. The screens in the cockpit of the car illuminating the way for the driver as well in some ways. Some blue light to minimize eye fatigue. Some of those additions that they've all done to try and ensure that in the real world these cars are, I was going to say friendly to drive around for long periods of time. I'm not sure that's necessarily the right word. Phil Krause through into the back straightaway as it's a nice steady run into the box for John Badefer. Remember, 28.6 seconds stationary for Phil Krause.
Yeah, but really it's his teammate with the 37-second stop that Badefer is looking at. He's never going to come out in front of Phil Krause, being 4 seconds back before the round of pit stops came in. So I think really the interesting thing will be with his teammate, and I think he's going to come out in front.
He does go for a longer stop than Phil Krause, so that's an important number to look at, as behind Badefer, O'Brien has now finally found his way into the pit lane as well. It is a slightly, no, in fact, 38.9 second stop for John Badefer. It's actually longer than Graham Sanders, but as expected, the extra lap has worked a treat. And with traffic also not helping the cause for the 100, Badefer finds himself 2.8 seconds in front. But now, split strategies, still 50 minutes to go. I feel like if you are John Badefer and Graham Sanders, it's now just push, 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 and hope that you've got enough pace to close on a longer stop for Phil Krause later on.
It definitely seems that way. Certainly it looks like both Badefer and Sanders want to go as long as possible on this second stint, which is kind of an interesting call if I'm being honest, but it does show that probably there's not a lot of fall off in these tires at all. So they're confident that when it comes down to lighter fuel later on in this race, they're going to be just fine at the end of it. But yeah.
I was going to say as well, the fact that they're not so worried about tires is stark contrast, Andrew, to some of the other races this season. Every race that we do takes place virtual standard time, so in sim on iRacing Day, the 15th of May, which means at most places it gets pretty toasty.
Yeah, certainly not today, not in the darkness here tonight. It's going to be a cool one, and it's going to allow the tires to really be taken care of throughout this whole race. So yeah, very, very interesting results and very interesting strategy choices, and very different from what we've seen so far.
And look at that, left side of the screen, pit stop times for your GT3s. Matthew Morehart is only 1.8 seconds off the back of Sean Campbell. Now, unfortunately, that's only momentary excitement, because you can also see a 5-second shorter pit stop for Matthew Morehart. But this is a play from the 62, Andrew, to try and get into the draft of the race leader, save a bit of fuel, and as Josh Chin has leapfrogged Ryan Otis in the pit stop cycle, hope to leave those two to fight for third.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chin will be happy that he was able to get that position back from Otis as well. So definitely it looks like it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight between the two of them for that third position. Meanwhile, back further in your field, you can see that Chris Reagan was the big loser of that pit stop cycle. He was in front of Carter, Callisto, Staples, and Marquez coming into the cycle. But I don't think it was the pit stop that did it. I think it was some mistakes on his outlaps that have put the driver who was at the head of the conga line all the way to the back.
It's so easy at a track like this to just run a bit wide, get in the grass, get in the gravel, and also lose momentum even if you don't spin the car around. And so maybe that was part of it. Impressive, by the way. I've been just keeping an eye on whether Bradley Sexton was going to be able to bring the number 16 back out onto track, and well, I tell you what, your eyes don't deceive you. That's the 16, resplendent in the breast cancer awareness colors for the month of October. That's back out there. But Andrew, this is the remarkable thing. 21 laps down from the leader.
21 laps down from the leader, but he does have the prototype of Caleb Bedsey in front of him. It is a little bit of a gap still for him to get there, but he definitely does have the ability and the time to get at least one more position here. Do
you know how many minutes that translates to, Andrew, from seconds?
How many minutes?
Apparently 37 minutes, 12 seconds, 0.5.
That 0.5 is the most important part, though.
probably the most brutal of it all. He's just passed Trevor Malone on track, by the way, who's also had a pretty brutal time out there. 14 minutes and 13 seconds on pit lane. He's a good 6 laps down from his next nearest rival, but in championship battles, you've got to push as much as you can. He will push towards the very end, as I'm sure plenty of others will. And speaking of pushing, I think Chase Wilson, who's just cracked the top 5 courtesy of the pit stop cycle, as Michael O'Brien's lost a whole bunch of time courtesy, I think, of just not feeling comfortable with the car as we take a look back at him. Chase Wilson slid his way into the top 5 as well, Andrew.
Chase Wilson's gotten around Brian Bennett here, and I don't think that he's going to get much further up the field without any help from some carnage, but at least for right now, it's a battle between Wilson and Bennett for that final position in that top 5.
Looking rearwards from the AM points leader, because again, just a reminder, AMs and pros classified in the championship separately, but on track for points classified together. If Chase Wilson is in front of Brian Bennett, he deprives Bennett of some points, he gains some points for himself, and vice versa. Wilson behind Bennett, Bennett gains points, Wilson loses out. They're not scored separately as incentive to fight. Especially important given that for Wilson, the next AM machine, 10th spot, Creighton Carter, almost 30 seconds behind.
Yeah, all of that battling that the second half of the GT3 field did really allowed Chase Wilson to get that gap far and away more than I think he was even hoping for at the beginning of this race. So definitely Chase Wilson is on the front foot in the championship battle this race.
It's going quite well after taking a couple of races off during the summer. On his return, not everything went his way either, and so it's great to get that championship momentum back under yourself. Crucial as well, championship momentum. Phil Kraus searching for 3 wins on the bounce. Andrew, he has been able to pull out a further 2 odd seconds over the likes of Baderfer and Sanders, who again, longer pit stops, almost 10 seconds longer. Will have heavier cars. Phil Kraus will be hoping to make his BMW M Hybrid a bit of a rocket ship.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is there's a big difference in weight between the 2 cars at this point. Kraus probably filled up to about 3/4 of a tank, whereas Baderfer and Sanders would have taken the full fuel that they could, and they're going to go as long as they can on this second stint to have just basically a splash and dash at the end. So that's really what to watch out for now is I think Kraus is going to have to fill most of the way back up on fuel again. Sanders and Baderfer, with how the tires have been performing, they might just be looking at a splash and dash, no tires here, Arjuna.
That's going to be an interesting one, given that even though you do fuel and tires at the same time, if you're not taking that much fuel, like you mentioned, you can get away with not taking tires and save a bit of time. So plenty of strategy answers to come, and given where we saw them pit, they could come into the pit lane relatively soon for what would be their final pit stops of this Gomez Sim Industries Nürburgring Grand Prix presented by Next Level Racing. Still working their way, of course, through the night. It's 1.7 seconds that split second and third. It's a little bit closer behind. And for some of your GT3 runners, go back to Bennett, Wilson, AM versus Pro battle here. Just let you know that Matthew Morhart has lost some ground to Sean Campbell, so his call to short pin and maybe get in the draft worked for a few laps. Still might get him a second spot, Andrew, and what a remarkable run that would be for that Synergy Motorsports car. Week on week, we keep singing the praises of a driver that keeps improving.
That's the biggest thing, is when you can see that improvement week to week, you just can't help but root for the guy, because he's been one of the drivers who's put in the effort, put in the practice time, and he's slowly but surely gotten faster and faster in this car. And I'll tell you what, he's not that far back off of Sean Campbell right now. I'm sure Campbell has probably another gear that he can push to if he needs to, but right now Matthew Morhart has not only caught up to Chin and Otis on pace, but he has surpassed them in this race.
And so as half of the Gomez Sim Industry Nürburgring Grand Prix presented by Next Level Racing is complete, still drivers work their way towards the final pit stop cycle of the race. Don't go anywhere on RaceSpotTV. We'll be right back with the run to the checkered flag. Welcome back to RaceSpotTV and to the run through the night for the Gomez Sim Industries Nürburgring Grand Prix. It's the 14th round of the 2023 Butt Kicker Sportscar Series, and we're delighted to have you along for the ride. Already half the race complete, less than 40 minutes still left to run, and of course moments away from the final pit stop strategy cycle of the race. It's Arjuna Kankipati alongside with Andrew Kinsella as ever as we work our way closer and closer towards the checkered flag. And Andrew, we've seen plenty of retirees, mostly in the prototype class, to be completely fair. Traffic maybe hasn't been as dangerous as we were expecting. Still plenty of close battles out and around the track.
Yeah, the darkness has been full of surprises here tonight, Arjuna. As you say, maybe not as many traffic problems, but there have been mistakes happening. There have been a few black flags and penalties for cut corners. That has affected things, and of course there's the ever-present strategy race as well, particularly in that LMDH field. Will the shorter pit stops of Kraus on the first cycle come back to bite him, and will Betafer and Sanders be able to maybe short fill on this second stop to get right back into the battle?
And of course, with Phil Kraus now 8 laps into the run, if there was about a 75% tank of fuel thrown into that car, you would potentially expect the private label team hype machine to come in maybe in another 10 laps or so, maybe an 18 lap stint for Betafer and Sanders, who maybe put in a full tank of fuel. Maybe they can go the full 24 laps and see where that leaves them with the quote-unquote splash and dash. I always feel that term should be reserved for pit stops used in the final 10 minutes or 5 minutes of a race, but maybe it will be a little bit apt given there'll be no tires thrown onto their cars either. We're watching on board with Brian Bennett though, in what is a crucial fight right now as the AM Championship leader, the AM leader in the race here today as well, continues to fend off the advances of the 161.
Yeah, it's been a really solid drive for Chase Wilson. Was able to get around Brian Bennett, and Bennett hasn't found a way past him, but he hasn't let Chase Wilson go either. It looks like Bennett might just be fractionally faster than Wilson at this point in the race, but it's so difficult to pass around the Nürburgring, particularly for these GT3 drivers. It's really difficult to get the type of run you need down these straightaways in order to really make a move stick.
Especially with reduced draft that so many drivers have complained about in the recent month or so. The one benefit that they at least have is the grass has been updated by iRacing to a bit easier to control your car on, and so sometimes now you can find yourself off into the grass, but at least be able to bring it back onto the track in one piece rather than in several pieces. They're on to the 9th lap or so of their respective fuel window. We do have about a 19 or 20 lap fuel run to talk about throughout the course of this GT3 class. Featured onboard cameras for today. Let's quickly run you down through them because we didn't get the chance to do so at the very start of the race. David Ciro rides with the BMW Performance Driving School. Drive on the edge of physics and experience the ultimate rush. Visit bmwperformancecenter.com. In your GT3 class, Andrew Marquez has seen plenty of action today, as has his butt kicker onboard camera. Sim racing is better with butt kicker, and visit thebuttkicker.com. Chasing down your race leader up towards the front, HyperX is meant to ride with John Bader for whatever you play, however you play. HyperX knows we're all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. Those are your featured onboard cameras for today's race, but the beauty of sim racing, we get onboard cameras with everybody in the field. The only thing that you can struggle to do in sim racing still, Andrew, is in the night conditions, be able to see where you're going.
Yeah, it's definitely realistic in that perspective as well, Arjuna, because night racing is no joke, whether it's in the real world or whether it's in the sim. It's a different type of discipline. You have to be so precise with your inputs, and it takes a lot of practice to get the lines down, and it's a lot of muscle memory, if I'm being honest, to make sure that you're hitting the same spots lap after lap, because you just don't have the visual cues you do in the daytime.
It's a different type of consistency as well, like you say, because the cues are so different, right? So if you're good at driving at night, or rather if you're good at driving in the day, it doesn't always mean you're good at driving at night. For the most part, if you could drive at night, you can drive in the day. Once you get more references, it doesn't become more difficult. Although I guess filtering out references, maybe that's something that real drivers who have so many different sensors to work with maybe that is something they do have to think about. Would be curious to get the opinion on some of those real-world drivers and how they think about that. Maybe Richie Hearn, who of course competes in some of our Lionheart series, in the Retro series in particular here on RaceSpot, could give us some of that insight. Joshua Chin's pulled away from Ryan Otis, and this is of course, by the way, battle for second in the championship, Andrew.
It is, and Josh Chin definitely needed to be able to pull out just a little bit on this middle stint here. Of course, he was able to get around Otis in that pit stop cycle, which could mean that he might need to come in just a little bit before Otis, possibly take a little bit less fuel. So it's always important to get whatever advantage you can while you have it.
We've seen Josh Chin many a time try and come in early on pit stops and try and be a bit more aggressive at times. It's not always worked out. Seems like as of late he's gone back more to status quo with more normal strategies. Slightly more aggressive this time with the fuel saving, helps him get the margin, and the outlaps played their part as well. Always interesting seeing what the cockpit of various race cars look like, because as I was talking about earlier, if we jump on board with the fellow private label Team Hype machine, this one at the very front of the LMDH field, a little bit of a blue hue in the cockpit, Andrew, just to try and relieve the driver's eyes in these night conditions.
Yeah, it's amazing what different teams and what different manufacturers will think of to try and make the driver's job just that little bit easier. Of course, none of these cars are built for comfort, and so having luxuries like blue lights, while it's nice, it's still not necessarily the most comfortable position that you could be in for an hour and a half in the real world. So any little thing that can give the drivers a little advantage without costing too much weight is definitely something that manufacturers are willing to try and figure out, because extracting the maximum performance for long periods of time is really, really difficult.
And at the end of the day, something like a blue light's not making your driver faster necessarily, right? It's more about consistency in a long run. And so, you know, when you see how compact these drivers are packaged into the cockpit of their cars, that blue light may not be a major comfort factor, but given how much they're being thrown around anyway, if you can make their life a little bit easier, I don't think any of them are necessarily going to complain too hard. The 7 remaining LMDHs are all spread out, by the way. Closest gap amongst the M hybrids is 3 and a bit seconds between your HydroRace Geodesic Racing teammates. Sean Campbell has just continued to run away at the front of the field. We do have pit stops starting to begin once more. This is Chris Reagan bringing the 19 down to the lane.
Reagan looks to be splitting the stops up in equal stint lengths. He was in right at that hour mark on the first time around. Now he's in at the half hour mark remaining, so just doing the old faithful, easy to calculate. The benefit to this is you don't have to do any math while you're driving around, Arjuna.
Yeah, I mean, doing math at any time is always a touchy subject. When you're driving, it's always nice to not have to think about things. Ooh, that's Chris Staples in the 43, who Reagan's been in a fight with, and so maybe a nice time to have come down pit lane just before that spin. And as Reagan is deposited back onto track and into relatively clean air, task at hand, put the pressure onto your number 43. Sean Campbell can do it all, can't he, by the way? He's driving fast at the front of the field. He's in our YouTube chat as well, Andrew. He's the purple mood lighting gang.
Yeah, I mean, should we expect anything less from Campbell? Famously able to YouTube chat and race at the fastest level, not just in this race, but in multiple races that we've seen. And he has opened up the gap over Matthew Morehart to now just about 5 seconds. Meanwhile, we're looking at the continuing battle between Chase Wilson and Brian Bennett. It may look like a replay, but this is what's happening live. Brian Bennett continues to hound the back of Wilson. Wilson just not giving him enough opportunity to get alongside.
And frustrating in some ways, maybe, but again, still that one pit stop to come. Are these drivers thinking about what their pit crews are going to have to do? I was talking with Matt Busa, an eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series driver, after a race that he was doing. And the answer that he gave as to why he lost the race by a slim margin, Andrew, his pit crew didn't do the work fast enough. But that is something that plays a part here on iRacing. Sometimes your pit crew's a little bit faster. You got to make sure you motivate them properly, I guess.
Well, it's not just motivation; it's actually how you line up in the box. Depending on how you line up, how square you are, and depending on the circuit, because it depends on the pit crew animations as well, you can have your time fluctuate by tenths or even almost half a second. So it really is down to the drivers to make sure that they're nailing every single aspect of this race, including how they stop on pit lane.
Incentivize your pit crew. That's my advice. Just suggest that you'll share in your virtual winnings after the race, because they're so plentiful, as we all know. I think the more important thing as well at times is remembering what type of service that you can do. I think back to the final of the BMW Sim GT Cup hosted in BMW Sim Live at the end of 2021, where it was a mandatory pit stop that you had to do, but you only had to change one tire. So what did some teams do? They changed the left rear. What did other teams do? They changed the right rear. Guess what? The pit crew has to walk around the car to change one of those tires, Andrew. Therefore, it was a couple of seconds slower.
Exactly. So this is just another aspect of the realism of iRacing. The only thing that we don't have that you mentioned, Arjuna, that could be interesting is a virtual currency for iRacing.
Oh, no.
I think that should be something that could be implemented.
No, don't you do that. Then somewhere EA is licking their lips going, microtransactions, what? Anyway, what's happened to Chris Reagan? Because he's in pit lane and it's a lazy spin, much like we saw with Chris Staples. Although I think there's no damage to the car, maybe some damage, unfortunately, to the ego after what's been a difficult day, to be fair, for Chris Reagan, and that might be his race run for tonight.
I suspect Reagan has been having some handling issues because he got into the back of Malone. We know Malone had 10 minutes of repairs, so it wouldn't surprise me that Reagan's car was also damaged and wasn't handling quite right since then as well. So could just be that he's gotten tired of having to limp a wounded car around and is just retiring from this race, seeing as he probably isn't going to get much further up this field as the race goes on.
No, not with the level of attrition that we'll continue to see. It's Trevor Malone and Bradley Sexton, the two that are really showing some endurance racing spirit out there. 8 laps down for Trevor Malone, and a remarkable 22 laps down for Bradley Sexton in that number 16 machine. Remember, 2 weeks from today, Andrew, it's the final round of October. 3 races this month as well, quite crazy. And it's over to Imola, which we saw traffic difficulties in some races this season. I'm quite curious to think about the run into turn 1, how that's going to go in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, I'm more thinking about Variante Alta and some of the corners on the back half of that track, because there's not a lot of room for these prototypes to dart through the GT3 field there, is there?
No, but I will, I guess, say that Imola's hosted its fair few rounds of the European Le Mans Series. So it's hosted prototypes, not maybe... I was going to say maybe not prototypes this fast, but they've always had LMP2s, and the current LMDHs are actually former LMP2 speeds at many tracks. So you never know. The good thing is, Andrew, I'm not going to be around in 2 weeks' time, which means my voice is going to be saved what I think is going to be a crazy round.
I definitely think that you're right. This is going to be a crazy round. You always seem to miss the really crazy rounds, because you missed Mosport earlier too, didn't you?
I did. I do manage to pick, I say good ones to miss. Good ones for my voice to miss, I think, is the better way to put it. Alexander Van der Sar, 28.7 seconds with 24 minutes left to go on the pit stop, on the clock rather, as he leaves pit lane. So that gives us an indication then for Phil Kraus. Maybe only another 28-second pit stop for him, probably in about 2 or 3 laps time, as your race leader heads off into turn number 1. For Bedifer and Sanders then, could they go as short, Andrew, as maybe an 18-second pit stop?
I think it very well could be. I think based on when they stopped for their first pit stop, I think that Bedifer in particular could potentially go even as late as 10 minutes remaining. and make it a true splash and dash. Because they came in with 50 minutes to go. Betafer did
something like that. That sounds about right.
So that would be a 40-minute stint. Another 40-minute stint would take you right to 10 minutes to go.
I guess it is coming after the iRacing Petit Le Mans, where we do see so many stints going heavy fuel save. Not one lap, not 2 laps at times, maybe 3 or 4 laps of fuel saving a stint. Maybe that's what we're seeing here, a similar sort of strategies to eke out a bit more fuel from the tank. There's not really that big a difference from them in terms of the pit stop times, the stint times and lengths for the first stint. Kraus was able to go as long as Betafer and Sanders was for the most part, so it's just going to be the question now of when does Kraus elect to blink, and he's having to go through some LMDH traffic as well. He's just lapped Michael O'Brien, has gone and passed everyone up now to the top 5 in class. Bounces through the chicane and exits stage right. Heads down to pit lane with 23 minutes to go.
And he's actually got some GT3 traffic in front of him, so that's going to cost him a little bit of time on this pit entry as well. So not ideal for Kraus there. That's Matthew Morehart coming down from the 2nd place in the GT3 field. So yeah, this is about when we were expecting Kraus to come down. So now the question is, how long will Betafer and Sanders go? And will Betafer be able to use this clean air and low fuel to really eke out some time here?
And importantly, maybe Kraus goes up on the jacks, which means he's going to have to get the tires up to temperature. We'll see if that plays a factor. We'll keep you updated on the pit stop time. You'll see it on your left side of the screen. 15 seconds and rising for Phil Kraus. Matthew Morehart, 16.8 seconds stationary for him. Whereas the Synergy Motorsports number 62 going to come out directly behind Brian Bennett and Chase Wilson, who continue to fight. It's not ideal for Morehart in his quest to try and grab 2nd here today.
No, all it needed was a second quicker on pit lane, and Matthew Morehart would have been looking excellent. As it is, Chase Wilson, all he's concerned about is Brian Bennett. So there's been a lot of defensive driving from the number 13 of Chase Wilson in these last few laps, and it's going to cost Morehart a lot of time here. This could actually play into Josh Shin's hand just a little bit, and we might have a little bit of a battle for 2nd brewing.
If you're curious how long the pit stop time was for Phil Kraus, 22.6 seconds. So about 6 seconds shorter than his previous time in the box, but only 4 seconds longer than maybe what we think Sanders and Betafer will end up being stationary for. So now my question becomes, is their mark going to be shorter? Kraus jukes up the inside of 2 GT3s in towards the Michael Schumacher-esque, clears the final one in towards the final sector. Important to make sure that loses minimal time there. Doing the commentator math with pit strategy is always a dangerous thing. But Andrew, does Phil Kraus seem like he's got this race under control?
I will tentatively agree with you, because I really do think it comes down to how long Betafer can stay out for and how short a pit stop is going to be. Because I really don't think he's going to take tires. I think it's going to be a very quick fuel, and if he can make it to 10 minutes remaining, I think he might still have a shot at this yet.
If it's 10 minutes remaining, Kraus stopped with, 23 minutes to go?
Yeah.
And that was 23 seconds stationary. Was Kraus limited by the amount of time that it took to take tires? That could be the potential. That could be the source of maybe a longer pit stop for the 91 than what we would have calculated. Brian Bennett's headed off to pit lane, so that's 1 car clear for Matthew Morehart. Still has to get past Chase Wilson. 16.8 seconds stationary for him. It's now just Josh Chin and Ryan Otis who will wait to see down onto the pit lane. Chin's continued to build his margin up to the 95. Remember, these drivers split by 6 points in the battle for 2nd in the championship, Andrew. Every race matters between these two.
Absolutely, and this is so important that Josh Chin is doing what he's doing right now. Again, he's had some rough goes of it over the course of the season, but if he can start to get some momentum and maybe get a result or two over Otis here, he's really going to change the complexion of that battle for 2nd.
And in a season where they've been so close on speed every single round, stay out of trouble with traffic. That's step number 1. Keep yourself out of trouble on pit lane, step number 2. 19 minutes or so to go. Here's Wilson, who still pounding around as the best of the AM drivers, but owing us a pit stop maybe in the next handful of laps. Lionheart's not really close, so that's an impressive sign once again, just a testament to the pace of the number 13 points leader in AM. And as we get closer to the end of the season, looking forward now to the next season, we've said it many a time, but Chase Wilson could very much be thrown up there in towards the pros and be swimming with the sharks as he swims his way down to pit lane.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, Chase Wilson's first and only season as an AM driver. He's definitely proven that he can more than hang with the pro drivers of the Lionheart series. So definitely looking for him to graduate to the pro ranks next season.
That's what you want to see as well, right, from the AM Championship, is drivers that maybe are new to the class, maybe new to the car, who get seat time, experience, confidence, and as we see the pace evolve, as the speed improves, take the step up, compete with the best of the best. And again, Chase Wilson's still maybe trying to find that next level to close to the Moorharts, the Otis, the Chins, and the Campbells of the world. We'll see how it fares for him. Of course, no Miguel Vigo, by the way, today. The Hydro Race Geodesic Racing GT3 entry, also missing Carlos Villa, the second one of the black and gold BMW M4 GT3s, but I did see Miguel Vigo in the YouTube chat earlier watching on and cheering on his two drivers, Badefer and Sanders, still out there on track to the 20th run, a lap of the run in Sanders' case. Of course, Badefer went that one extra lap. Crucially, Andrew, that means they're only 3 laps away now from being forced to come down to pit.
Yeah, it's definitely getting down to it for Badefer and Sanders. They need to be putting in some good lap times, and unfortunately, I'm not sure that Badefer is putting in quite the time that he needs to. 1:42.1 the last time by. Makes a big move down the inside of Tyler Graff there, and that was important because it limited the amount of time that he's going to be checked up there. But he was only about 0.3 of a second quicker than Phil Kraus was that last lap. But of course, now Kraus has actually just put in a really poor lap, so he must have gotten held up majorly on that last lap there.
Traffic can be brutal, especially if you catch it at just the wrong time. 12.6 seconds is the stop for Joshua Chin, though, and he's going to emerge in front of Matthew Moorhart. Were those couple of laps that the 62 was tucked up behind Chase Wilson, the crucial ones that have cost him that track position? Well, there's still 16 minutes to go. Ryan Otis is yet to make his final trip down pit lane, but as it stands right now, net second, Josh Chin in the 73.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, that means that Moorhart took tires and Chin did not, so we'll have to see what kind of difference that makes towards the end of this stint. We've definitely seen that slower drivers have been able to hold off faster drivers before, so it might just be that even if Moorhart has the faster car and the faster tires, he's not able to get back around the 73.
We are into those dying stages as well. There's Ryan Otis in towards the final sector. Still has the back straight to navigate through, but 18th lap of the window. Could go maybe one more lap, but maybe would not be shocked to see the number 95 duck down to the lane. Remember, there is a 6-point difference between Otis and Chin in the points as they stand right now. After this race, we've got, 4 rounds left to go. There's not many races left, and they don't want to be relying on the drop weeks. Here comes the number 95 down to the pit lane for the final time today.
Otis needs a really good pit stop here. He's got to be in contact with Moorhart and Chin coming out of this pit stop. Otherwise, you're going to likely see Chin get not 1 but 2 spots up from Otis here.
And that's a nice tidy run on commitment to the lane, but already Chin through the final chicane and into the final corner with some breathing room to Moorhart for the time being. That a slow run for Josh Chin? It is! It's a slowdown for the private label Team Hype car, I think. Might just be able to pick up some momentum, but Moorhart's around the outside. They've blasted past Ryan Otis, who's not in touching distance for the fight for second.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, this is going to be a fight here. Moorhart now alongside Chin. Chin had to outbrake him after that slowdown penalty. So the fight is on between Morhart and Chin for that second position.
I want to go back and figure out what happened there to Joshua Chin, because I would have thought he would have lost more time if that was a slowdown, but somehow managed to stymie the bleeding in the nick of time. Straight to the replay will go. Looks fine through the first. Oh, he gets a little bit spooked, to get a little bit loose, and it's on the second part of the apex where I think that slowdown comes.
Yeah, it's definitely on the second apex. You can see he just gets a little bit of a wheel hop over the first, and it just pushes him just that little bit too much carry, just a little bit too much speed and slow down penalty. And he did serve a whole bunch of it before the straightaway, letting Alexander Van de Sant by in the prototype, but he definitely had to serve a little bit more on that front straightaway.
And again, I feel like it's the night conditions that are making this even more difficult to hit the marks. Otis 6 full seconds behind. So it's the time lost on track that's really dropped Otis out of the strategy. Kudos must be given to Joshua Chin, that on pace has made this strategy call work, but it's 6/10 on track, 13 minutes to go, and it will be battled between these two to decide second and third spots. We're still waiting for Sean Campbell to come down the pit lane, yes. But your race leader looking comfortable with that pit stop in hand for the time being. Another mistake from Joshua Chin, though. Is that another slowdown penalty? It is!
Back-to-back laps for Josh Chin, making the same mistake through the chicane. That is just a mental lapse there for Josh Chin in that number 73 car, and he'll just be kicking himself right now, Arjuna.
And the worst part is, you made that mistake twice. Are you going to make it a third time? We'll find out soon, maybe, but for the time being, let's focus on the LMDHs once more. Phil Kraus will be working his way through the middle sector of the lap right now towards the final chicane, but it's Badefer and Sanders, who we're not expecting to go up onto the jacks, who we're expecting just to take fuel, who slide their way into the box, and now the stopwatch counts. We think it could be as short as 15 seconds. Could it be shorter than that? Kraus is already towards the timing line, and Badefer's going to get out in front.
What a pit stop exchange for John Badefer there.
Sanders has lost some time, but it's within 1.5. 2 BMW M4 GT3s between first and second. Phil Kraus has to set something up right now to close the gap. It's two at the front with 12 minutes to go.
That was absolutely perfectly executed by John Badefer there. He stayed out just long enough, took advantage of the low fuel and relatively fresh tires and the low tire degradation that has happened here. Just a 12-second pit stop, and he is out in front by 1.5 seconds over Phil Kraus. Now we'll have to see, can Phil Kraus respond, because this is the first time that he's really being forced to push, and he pushes too hard.
Phil Kraus is in the gravel, brings it back under control, but after losing a crucial 2 seconds on track. And is that enough for John Badefer to have broken away? Remember, Joshua Chin, another driver that we don't think has taken tires, looks to be struggling out on track. That's the question mark for Badefer. How are those Michelin tires hanging on?
But you have to think, Arjuna, that this has taken Phil Kraus completely by surprise. I don't think that he was factoring just how quickly Badefer could get off a pit lane there. And because of that, he started pushing, and he just pushed too hard here. This is a flat-out mistake from Phil Kraus. He just gets in here too deep, was never going to be able to make this corner, and he was lucky to limit the time loss to just a couple of seconds there.
I've gone deep into that corner more times than I can count, and because it's downhill, gravity works against you, and very, very good job to bring it back with two tires still crucially on some tarmac. There's a little bit of runoff that you can take, and Phil Kraus maximized the opportunity that he had to use all of that. So now 3 seconds still the gap between those top two. What can Phil Kraus do in the final 10 minutes of this race? What can Josh Chin do? It's two private label Team Hype machines on the charge. Chin now within half a second of Morhart's number 62.
Yeah, he's really closing back up to the back of Matthew Morhart, and we're going to have to see how Matthew Morhart responds to the pressure from the King of Chins, because if there's any driver who can put you under pressure and look intimidating behind you, obviously Sean Campbell would be one, but Josh Chin has to be a close second.
On board with the 73. And see that Morhart's doing the expected thing, trying to widen the track everywhere that you can, but on the run onto the back straightaway. Slightly compromises his own momentum. Is that going to be the chance for Chin to get a good run? Slightly, but not going to close sufficiently to send a look into that slower chicane. They've got a car coming up, try and get past them. That is Alex Guyon, who is not really in a fight right now, willing to let these two have their time in the focus, their time on the battle tracks for the time being. Back up towards Kraus and Bader, who are closing on those two as well. They'll get ready to cross towards the line and give an indication, Andrew, of how many laps are left to run.
Yeah, I think you're looking at, what, 4, maybe 5 laps if we're lucky here, Arjuna. So there's really not very much time at all for Phil Kraus to get back into this race. He was 0.2 of a lap, 0.2 of a second quicker on that last lap. That's not enough to get back to the back of John Baderfer.
Traffic could play its part, like we were speculating before, but is Kraus now just going to settle for second? Not going to push it for another mistake, given that it would be nice to win 3 in a row, yes, but really got to make sure you accumulate the championship points. I wonder what Joshua Chin is thinking right now as well. Matthew Morhart could be the teammate that Ryan Otis needs to prevent Chin from grabbing a couple of crucial points. And with these drivers knowing that the leaders have gone past them, they have confidence in knowing how many laps they have to run, how much fuel they'll need to have under them as well. That's the always concerning thing when you're in the slower class in a timed race, Andrew, is you never necessarily know how many laps you're going to run.
As Phil Kraus comes around his private label teammate there, as well as Matthew Morhart. So that's your top 2 in LMDHs now should have a fairly clear track. And your, as we watch, I believe that was Graham Sanders making a little bit of a dive down the bottom there, but now your battle for second and third should have a clear track as well. So it's clear sailing for all of the potential battles here in the final 5 minutes.
Going to be fun as well. If you're curious what conditions are like with the pitch black, they've gotten slightly cooler, but only slightly. 1 degree Celsius, both in air and track temperature has fallen away. There's still plenty of wind that's blowing around the track, but it's not really a major factor for these relatively lumbering machines relative to the open wheel counterparts that maybe some of you are more familiar with on RaceSpotTV. And of course, it's not just Monday nights where we have Lionheart Racing Series action. The Thursday nights of the winter continue to be busy as the Lionheart Retro Series continues its way through its season. Not this week, but next week we have its next round at a short course, the HyperX 175 at the Milwaukee Mile. I know you love that one, Andrew.
Milwaukee's always a fun race to watch, particularly in the Retro Series. You can really hustle the car around there, so it should definitely be an entertaining watch.
And after that, the diversity, the adaptability of drivers in that series is so remarkable. They go to Imola after that, then over to Nashville, Road America, Gateway, Auto Club. Every sort of different challenge to think about in the race for a championship. And of course, Sean Campbell, not just points leader in the GT3 Pro category here, but the Lionheart Retro Series points leader as well. Phil Kraus has lost some more time. He's closer to Graham Sanders than ever before. Just 1.3 the margin between them. 5 minutes to go. Josh Chin still trying to work to try and set up a move on Matthew Morhart to the back straight. Again they will go, and this time gets a slightly better run. Not going to be close enough, but Chin's still figuring out where he's going to try and make this move happen.
Yeah, the problem for Chin is that you get so close on the brakes here, but you really can't nail the run as the trailing car. So you have to find a way to just get through this corner here better, and this is your best passing opportunities down into turn 1. But it's all about the exit of the final corner, and I just don't think Chin quite has enough, but he's definitely getting closer than he has on previous laps.
There's no difference in top line speed. They both have the same wing settings at the rear end of the car. Down into turn 1, still too far behind. How much traffic do they have coming behind? Well, Alex Guyon, who had a very late pit stop, is back behind them. After that, there's a long wait before David Sirol will be the next to pass. So I have to think if Chin wants to get it done without traffic, It's going to have to work with these final 4 minutes, or maybe take advantage of that traffic, but it's not going to help. It's going to potentially hurt Chin just a little bit out of the arena in towards turn number 6. And here it goes. Here it closes up.
Yeah, Morhart made a mistake. He did. Guyon wasn't quite as assertive as he was hoping to be, and it allowed Morhart to have to get off it. Look at Morhart on the defensive line. Chin trying to go to the outside, tries the crossover into the horseshoe, side by side.
And that was, I think, Morhart being slightly pinched by Chin to the apex. Not going to work, though. Morhart holds on. Chin's not, I think, happy about being blocked to the grass. Looks to the inside through the Michael Schumacher S. Slight contact between the two, but they hold on. One of the fastest corners on the track, and rising over the crest, Joshua Chin has got it done, up to 2nd spot.
Oh, what a move there from Chin. A little bit of a hip check to the side of Morhart's car, but at that point in the race, it looked like Chin was far enough alongside to me that just a little bit of Rubbins racing type of scenario there in the GT3s with the fenders, but you can see Morhart was definitely very defensive down the straightaway into the horseshoe. And then Chin just was able to get a really solid run, did a nice V of the corner and got the run up into the Schumacher S's. Then just a little bit of slight contact there, but certainly not anything penalty worthy.
Both drivers, I think, also cognizant if they carry too much momentum wide. That's a corner where you're notoriously going to pick up a slowdown on either side. And so both decided, let's not give each other any more drama. What a move that was. Battle's not done and dusted, though. We'll keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on the fact that Phil Kraus has closed on Baedefer, but even closer now, Graham Sanders in the rearview mirror. 3 split by 4 seconds. And there's some traffic as well for, I think, them to work their way on through coming up. Tyler Groff, a GT3 machine. But of course, smaller field tonight, Andrew. Plenty of attritions played its part as well. 2 minutes. Should be 1 more lap to go for these drivers to the end.
Yeah, expecting the white flag this time by 1 to go. But I think the surprising thing for me is after Sanders lost so much time in that middle stint, he has been the fastest of the top 3 throughout this entire last stint. Unfortunately for him, his stint was only about 11 minutes long, so it's just not quite going to be enough, I think. But he should finish right on the back of Phil Kraus here.
1 more lap to go indeed. Sean Campbell's once again just jumped into the YouTube chat to say that he's been watching and the battles going on behind him on his relative, because there are some interesting things going on. Down into turn 1, top 3 run as they are. Brian Bennett's had an issue. He's not going to lose any spots, I think, as a result of this, but in his quest to try and close on Chase Wilson, things have come unstuck.
Yeah, unfortunate there for Bennett. He had a really solid race going there, and you can see it was in the battle with Chase Wilson. Just gets a little bit loose on entry coming out of the stadium section there, and the car was just always rotating through that corner, wasn't it?
It was, unfortunately, I think on the curb, or maybe he got a little bit too much onto it. Campbell has just crossed the line, by the way, to take the white flag for himself, but as Josh Chin pulls away from Matthew Morhart, his teammate Phil Kraus pulls away from Graham Sanders as well on the final lap of the race.
It looks like we're not going to have any late race drama at this point, barring someone potentially running out of fuel. It's been this driver, John Baedefer. He did the perfect strategy, made it work, did exactly what he needed to do, benefited from a small mistake from Phil Kraus. And when it looked like for so long in this race that John Baedefer was going to lose ground to Phil Kraus, he's ended the momentum from Kraus, and he's going to snatch back some momentum of his own.
Hey, and I'm the one that said it, didn't I? Kraus looked good. Kraus looked like he had the margin. But it was a strategy that one of the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing contingent was able to make work. For the first time since Road America, and for the 3rd time this season, it's John Baedefer that makes his way into HyperX victory lane at the Gomez Sim Industries Nürburgring Grand Prix, presented by Next Level Racing, in what was a dramatic drive to the very end. It will be a while before Chase Wilson gets towards the line, and in the meantime, an even longer time, at least for now, until Sean Campbell sees the checkered flag in HyperX victory lane as well. Goodness, Andrew, those first few laps were pretty intense for the drivers. Traffic maybe not as dangerous as we expected. That's not to say it wasn't a thrilling race here today.
It was definitely thrilling, and you could tell the difficulty that the darkness caused. Just look at the likes of Josh Chin, normally such a consistent driver, making 2 mistakes and nearly throwing away a second position. It's been a challenging race for all these drivers, but it's been, I think, a fun one. Certainly a fun one to watch and to commentate on as you see Sean Campbell coming across the line now.
The 100% streak continues. It's the WMP Racing extending its margin up towards the very front. I heard a bash in the background. Might have been Trevor Malone running his car off the road after a difficult day. And Joshua Chin will run his way to second and to the podium celebrations after passing Matthew Morehart in the final couple of laps. But Matthew Morehart take a bow, impressively on the front couple of rows in qualifying, and held that performance throughout the entirety of the race, just missing out on what would have been his best finish of the season. And it's just Chase Wilson, the AM leader, both in points and on track, that will scoop his way out of the final chicane, run his way towards the line, and grab another class victory. And Andrew, with the next of the AM contingent down in 10th spot, again continue to rack up those championship points.
This was a huge day for Chase Wilson. This is exactly what he needed to do. As we said, he took a couple of races off during the summer, and then he had a rude welcome back. This is exactly what he needed to get one hand on that championship trophy.
And so, as the drivers get ready to come and chat with us in the broadcast booth, we can grab a look at your race results, because boy, do these butt kicker race results tell a picture. Baderfer, Kraus and Sanders split by 3.2 at the end, and those were the three that ran away and kept it interesting on strategy. Great day in the team championship as well for Hydrace Geodesic. It'll be interesting to see how the points shake up in the driver standings, those shaking up out of this. Synergy Lavoie Motorsports and David Sirois fourth, Alexander Van der Sant fifth, and then Michael O'Brien, the final car on the lead lap, while attrition played its part. Guyon one lap down, and then Sexton got it back out on track to finish 22 laps adrift, but in front, crucially, of Caleb Bensi, in front of Matt Taylor, and of course in front of the unfortunate Austin Young. In the GT3s, 100% continued for Sean Campbell. 15 seconds clear almost of Josh Chin in that private label team hype number 73. Matthew Morehart will grab the podium, and plenty of accolades for his performance today, while Ryan Otis unfortunately couldn't make the same strategy as Joshua Chin worked, and a couple of points dropped in the championship mix. Chase Wilson celebrates another AM victory in fifth with Brian Bennett, Tyler Graff, Andrew Marquez, Lionel Callisto, and then Creighton Carter, all one lap down inside of your top 10. 11th for Staples, 12th for Malone, and then DNFs for Reagan and Spath in the 14 car GT3 field. So that's a look top to bottom at the race results. Then we can dive our way on into what's sure to be an interesting butt kicker post-race show, because our winners are standing by from HyperX Victory Lane. We can understand exactly what the night was like to race in, and crucially from John Baderfer, understand what he was thinking when it came to that middle stint. And with the strategy, John, Phil Kraus went slightly different to the Hydrace Geodesic Racing pair, but it worked out for you in the end. 2 seconds the margin at the line.
Yeah, Graham and I briefly talked strategy just before the race, and we both decided that no tires would probably be best, so we gave it a gamble. And I think on my last few in-laps before on the second stint, Phil got held up a little bit, and that was probably the difference.
When it comes to championship, of course, it's so close at the very top. We look to the points, 30 between 4 drivers and 3 Hydrace Geodesic Racing team members. We were kind of talking about how you have so much experience setting up the car when you're adjusting the driving styles to this fixed setup built by the Majors Garage. How much does that experience help in knowing what the car really needs to go fast?
It does help a little bit. Mostly it's just trying to find the limit of the track each time we go. The early part of the race, Phil was killing us in the last chicane there, and even Graham was killing me. But I kind of found something going over the curbs that just felt so much smoother, and from there I was able to kind of at least match Phil's times, and then maybe got a little bit better brakes in traffic along with the strategy.
I was going to ask, how was it out there with no night lights and just the headlights to illuminate the way? We saw quite a few slowdowns, it looked like. How was it finding the bounds of the track?
I didn't have any slowdowns, so it wasn't too bad for me. I did quite a bit of practice for this to get ready for it, because it is hard to find the apexes without any lights, but it's just an added challenge that makes it a little bit more fun. And I actually think it makes it better for the multi-class interactions. I don't know, I just feel like I can see the lights better than looking for a car in the mirror.
That's a good point, actually. Congratulations, John. 3rd victory of the year. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time in Imola.
All right, thanks, guys.
Talking to John Baderford from HyperX Victory Lane, we can cycle over to the GT3 Pro winner, where Sean Campbell once again on top. And Sean, you were jumping into our YouTube chat a little bit today. I mean, that surely tells us that you weren't too stressed at any point, right?
Only on the straights.
Okay.
I was still looking at the deltas and stuff, and I was getting kind of worried when Matthew was slowly closing up.
He was closing in that second stint as well with a slight gamble on fuel. Were you ever a little bit concerned about the traffic? John was just telling us that he prefers having headlights to look for rather than things in the mirror. As the slower class, what's your perspective on that?
As long as there's not like a couple LMDHs. If it's one, you can see them clearly, and it just goes by like it's daytime. But once there's a couple and the virtual mirror just gets completely blinded by light, you kind of have to guess where to go.
You seem to guess pretty well, all things considered. We mentioned that you won once again in an LMP3 car just before this, and I'm curious, jumping from the faster car class in a race to a slower class in a race, does that help you in traffic management? Because you kind of have an understanding of how some of those desperate sends that the prototypes will make at times.
Yeah, I think that's something I preach about multi-class in general, is to drive all the classes, because then you get an idea of what people like, how to overtake and how to know when someone's going to overtake and where they're going to do it. And it gives you a better chance of surviving in either direction of what car you drive.
Well, no matter what car you drive, you always seem to find your way towards the front. Congratulations on yet another victory, Sean. Imola up next in 2 weeks' time. We'll see you from there.
All right, peace.
Sean Campbell, always great, not just jumping into our YouTube chat, jumping in to our broadcast booth as well. And last but not least, winner once more, Chase Wilson. Chase, fun battle there with Brian Bennett, it seemed. Talk us through that from your perspective.
It was extremely stressful. Brian is a really great race car driver, and having him in my mirrors the whole time, especially running into all those corners in the dark, was a bit stressful. So once again, thank you to Rich Calais, my spotter, for talking me through that one. And it was a really good race on Brian's part. It was unfortunate that he spun there. It was looking like he was starting to get some pace on me.
Of course, building up even more margin to some of your AM Championship rivals as we head into the final 4 rounds of the championship. How are you feeling about what we've got coming up ahead?
Each race is a new adventure, so I'm just trying to take them one at a time and try to finish as close as I can to the top of the leaderboard. I know those pros at the other end of the spectrum are pulling away from me, but I can only really race my race and try to finish above the AM competitors and hopefully keep building a points gap.
And winner Chase Wilson wraps up our post-race coverage. Always great to chat to all of those drivers. And as mentioned, it's a trip across the pond once again, Andrew. And this is where I think you're most concerned about what the traffic's going to be like 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, traffic is going to be the story, I think, of Imola. It's going to be an entirely different animal to what we saw at the Nürburgring here today. A little bit tighter and certainly a lot less straightaways for the LMDHs to get around those GT3 drivers. I think that there's going to be some very interesting and potentially some desperate moves happening into a number of these corners. So definitely one to watch for in 2 weeks' time.
And of course, that's the first of the final 4 rounds of the season. Suzuka and Motegi, a Japanese swing, separated, in fact, of course, by almost 4 full weeks before Daytona to finish things off. Boy, is that going to be a fun ride. And another night race to close things out. I think this would have been a illuminating experience for many, Andrew. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. However, again, Daytona's a unique one, right? Because even though it's a night race, we still do have the lights around the oval turned on, albeit to 20% capacity.
Yeah, but even having those little bits of lights, it helps you so much, particularly with the bus stop chicane in the back of the track. It helps you so much to hit the apexes, just having that little bit of illumination. We heard from John Beta for how much he had to practice in order to really be able to nail the apexes here today. So definitely something to look forward to in that final round there.
Without a shadow of a doubt, and I was going to say we can't wait for it, but boy, What a fun ride the 2023 Butt Kicker Sportscar Series has been, and we're not done, so 4 races, of course, left to come. Before we say goodbye, do not forget to learn more about the Lionheart Racing Series, its partners, or the 3 competitions the sanctioning body puts forward. Head on to lionheartracingseries.com. While if you head on to social media, you can keep abreast of all the latest news from the world of Lionheart and inside of the virtual paddock. It's 2 weeks from today that we're racing once more for the HyperX Grand Prix of Imola. Do not forget, though, plenty more Lionheart action to come, not just in our race towards the championship in the Sportscar Series, but of course in the Lionheart Retro Series as well. But for now, it's time to say goodbye. For Andrew Kinsella alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thank you so much for joining us here at the Nürburgring for what has been a fascinating race here under the night lights. It's John Badefer that wins in the LMDH. It's Sean Campbell and Chase Wilson that extend their margins at the front in the GT3 classes. So much fighting still left to come, though, towards the end of 2023.